Early life and political beginnings. John Tyler was born into a prominent family in Virginia, a state with a deep political tradition. His father, John Tyler Sr., was a highly influential figure who served as the governor of Virginia and was a close ally of Thomas Jefferson. Growing up in such an environment, Tyler was instilled from an early age with a strong belief in states' rights and individual liberty. From a young age, Tyler displayed intelligence and a passion for politics. He attended the College of William and Mary, one of the oldest institutions in the United States, and graduated at just 17 years old. He then pursued a career in law, quickly proving his abilities. Not long after beginning his legal practice, he entered politics as a representative in the Virginia State Legislature. From the outset of his political career, Tyler was a steadfast advocate for states' rights, opposing the growing influence of the federal government. He firmly believed that individual states should have the authority to govern their own affairs without excessive interference from Washington. This stance aligned him with the states' rights movement, a widely held political ideology in the South at the time. With his strong oratory skills and unwavering convictions, Tyler quickly rose through the political ranks. He served as a U.S. congressman, the governor of Virginia, and later a U.S. senator. Throughout his tenure, he consistently opposed efforts to expand federal power and frequently clashed with presidents who sought to centralize authority. A pivotal moment in Tyler's career came when he broke with the Democratic Party and joined the Whigs. While he did not fully agree with all of the Whigs' policies, he believed they offered the best chance to check the power of the presidency and the federal government. This decision ultimately paved the way for his selection as vice president under William Henry Harrison, setting the stage for the most unexpected turn in his political career, becoming president of the United States in a way no one had anticipated. The accidental president and his controversial policies. John Tyler was never meant to lead the nation. In the 1840 election, he ran as the Whig Party's vice presidential candidate alongside William Henry Harrison. Their campaign slogan, "Tippecanoe and Tyler too," highlighted Harrison's military victory at the Battle of Tippecanoe. By capitalizing on public dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party and incumbent President Martin Van Buren, the Harrison-Tyler ticket secured a resounding victory. However, tragedy struck just 1 month into the new administration. President Harrison died suddenly of pneumonia, making him the shortest-serving president in U.S. history. This unexpected event thrust John Tyler into an unprecedented constitutional dilemma. At the time, the U.S. Constitution did not explicitly clarify whether the vice president should merely act as a temporary placeholder or fully assume the presidency upon the president's death. In response to this ambiguity, Tyler swiftly declared that he was not an acting president, but the rightful and full-fledged president of the United States. While this decision may have seemed logical, it sparked fierce opposition. Many members of Congress and even officials within his own administration refused to recognize him as the legitimate president. Some mockingly referred to him as his accidency, implying that he had stumbled into power by chance. Despite the controversy, Tyler stood firm and governed as a president in his own right. A president without a party. Tyler's clash with the Whigs. One of the most significant challenges of Tyler's presidency came from the very party that had put him in office, the Whigs. Harrison had been expected to implement the economic policies of Henry Clay, a key Whig leader. However, once in power, Tyler refused to follow the party's agenda. The Whigs sought to establish a national bank to regulate the financial system, but Tyler, a staunch advocate of states' rights, believed this would grant excessive power to the federal government. He vetoed not one, but 2 attempts to create a national bank, infuriating Whig lawmakers. His actions led to an unprecedented backlash. Nearly his entire cabinet, with the exception of Secretary of State Daniel Webster, resigned in protest. The Whigs took their discontent even further by formally expelling Tyler from the party, making him the only U.S. president in history to govern without any party affiliation. The Whig-controlled Congress even considered impeaching him, an extremely rare move at the time, but ultimately failed to do so. The annexation of Texas, a controversial achievement. Despite being politically isolated at home, Tyler pursued an ambitious foreign policy initiative that would profoundly shape American history: the annexation of Texas. At the time, Texas was an independent republic that had broken away from Mexico, but it had not yet been officially recognized as part of the United States. The issue was deeply divisive because it was tied to the contentious question of slavery. The South supported Texas's annexation, as it would add another slave state to the Union, while the North opposed it, fearing it would strengthen the political power of the Southern slaveholding states. Tyler, who leaned toward Southern interests, strongly pushed for Texas to join the Union. He dedicated much of his presidency to lobbying for annexation, even sending diplomats to negotiate a treaty with Texas. Although Congress initially resisted due to fierce opposition, Tyler relentlessly pursued the issue until the final days of his presidency. Ultimately, just days before leaving office in 1845, he successfully signed the resolution that led to Texas's annexation. This decision not only expanded U.S. territory, but also set the stage for the Mexican-American War, further fueling the nation's westward expansion. John Tyler may not have been a popular president in his time, but his policies, controversial as they were, had a lasting impact. He set the precedent that a vice president fully assumes the presidency upon the death of a sitting president, a principle that remains in place to this day. Additionally, his push for the annexation of Texas helped expand the United States westward, though it came at the cost of future political and military conflicts, clashes with Congress, and lasting legacy. A tense relationship with Congress. From the moment John Tyler assumed the presidency, he faced fierce opposition from Congress, particularly from members of his own Whig Party, who had supported him as William Henry Harrison's running mate. However, once in office, Tyler pursued an independent path, refusing to adhere strictly to Whig policies, which gradually alienated his party. The biggest point of contention between Tyler and Congress revolved around the issue of a national bank. Henry Clay, the leader of the Whig Party, sought to establish a new central bank to regulate the country's financial system. This aligned with Whig principles, but directly clashed with Tyler's views. He believed that a national bank would grant excessive power to the federal government, undermining states' rights, something he deeply valued. When Congress passed a bill to create the bank, Tyler immediately vetoed it. Congress revised the bill in an attempt to compromise, but Tyler vetoed it again. This enraged the Whigs so much that his entire cabinet, except Secretary of State Daniel Webster, resigned in protest, an unprecedented event in U.S. history. In a further display of defiance, the Whig Party formally expelled John Tyler, making him the first and only U.S. president to govern without a party while in office. The Whig-controlled Congress even attempted to impeach him, an extremely rare move at the time, accusing him of abusing power and defying their will. Though the impeachment attempt ultimately failed, it underscored the deep rift between Tyler and the legislative branch. Notable foreign policy achievements. Despite his struggles domestically, Tyler achieved notable success in foreign affairs. One of his most significant accomplishments was the signing of the Webster-Ashburton Treaty with Britain in 1842. This treaty settled border disputes between the U.S. and Canada, then a British territory, particularly in Maine and New Brunswick. While not a major triumph, it eased tensions between the U.S. and Britain and helped prevent potential conflicts. Additionally, Tyler played a key role in establishing trade relations with China through the Treaty of Wanghia, 1844. This was the first commercial agreement between the U.S. and China, opening lucrative trade opportunities and strengthening America's presence in Asia. The annexation of Texas, a strategic but controversial move. One of the most defining and contentious decisions of John Tyler's presidency was the annexation of Texas. At the time, Texas was an independent republic after breaking away from Mexico in 1836. However, its status remained precarious. Mexico still considered Texas a rebellious province, while Texas itself sought U.S. statehood for protection. The issue of Texas, however, was deeply divisive between the North and South. Northern states, which largely opposed slavery, feared that admitting Texas as a slave state would increase the South's political power in Congress. Conversely, Southern states strongly supported annexation, seeing it as an opportunity to expand slaveholding territory. Tyler, a staunch advocate for states' rights and Southern interests, was determined to bring Texas into the Union. He viewed territorial expansion as essential for America's growth and geopolitical strength. Despite resistance from Congress, Tyler relentlessly pushed for annexation. Though his initial treaty to annex Texas was rejected, he found a workaround, using a joint resolution, which required only a simple majority instead of a two-thirds Senate approval. Just days before leaving office in 1845, he successfully secured Texas's admission into the Union. However, this decision had enormous consequences. Mexico opposed Texas's annexation, which directly led to the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848. While the U.S. ultimately won, gaining vast territories, including California and New Mexico, the war intensified sectional tensions over slavery, setting the stage for the Civil War. The lasting impact of John Tyler's presidency. Establishing the presidential succession principle. When Tyler took office following Harrison's death, the U.S. Constitution did not clearly specify whether the vice president should fully assume the presidency or merely act as a temporary caretaker. Tyler firmly declared that the vice president would become the official president with full authority, setting a crucial precedent. This principle was later codified in the 25th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Expanding U.S. territory. The annexation of Texas, though highly contentious, was a pivotal moment in America's westward expansion. It set the stage for further territorial growth, but also deepened the national debate over slavery, a key factor leading to the Civil War. Advancing foreign relations. The Webster-Ashburton Treaty stabilized U.S.-British relations, while the Treaty of Wanghia opened the door for American commerce in China, expanding the nation's global influence. Though widely criticized during his presidency, John Tyler made significant contributions to American history. He was a controversial yet steadfast leader, unwilling to compromise on his beliefs, even at the cost of political isolation. And while he was denied a state funeral upon his death, an almost unprecedented snub for a former president, his legacy continues to shape the United States to this day. Life after presidency and historical legacy. Leaving the White House in isolation. After concluding his term in March 1845, John Tyler left the White House without receiving respect from either of the two major political parties in the United States. The Whig Party had expelled him, while the Democratic Party refused to welcome him back into their ranks. In fact, Tyler was one of the few presidents to leave office without strong political allies. His successor, James K. Polk, a Democrat, continued the territorial expansion policies that Tyler had set in motion, particularly by finalizing the annexation of Texas and leading the U.S. into the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848. However, Polk rarely credited Tyler for initiating the Texas annexation process, leading many at the time to view Tyler as a political failure rather than an influential leader. Despite being politically isolated, Tyler lived comfortably at his Sherwood Forest estate in Virginia, where he spent most of his time managing his land and being with his family. He remarried Julia Gardner, a woman much younger than him, and together they had 7 children, bringing Tyler's total number of children to 15, making him the U.S. president with the most children in history. Although he distanced himself from politics, Tyler remained closely engaged with national affairs, especially the growing tensions between the North and the South regarding slavery. He believed that the South had the right to secede if the federal government imposed excessive restrictions on them. From former president to secessionist leader. By the late 1850s, debates over slavery had reached their peak as the North and South grew increasingly divided. When Abraham Lincoln, a candidate opposed to the expansion of slavery, was elected president in 1860, the South felt threatened and began considering secession from the United States. At that time, Tyler participated in the 1861 Peace Conference in Washington, a last-ditch effort to prevent the American Civil War through diplomatic compromise. However, the conference failed because neither side was willing to make concessions. As Southern states started declaring secession, Tyler no longer remained neutral. Despite being a former U.S. president, he chose to support the South and officially aligned himself with the Confederate States when Virginia seceded from the Union in April 1861. Tyler quickly joined the newly formed Confederate government, becoming a delegate from Virginia to the Provisional Confederate Congress. He was even elected to the official Confederate Congress, but he passed away before he could take office in early 1862. A quiet death and rejection from the United States. John Tyler died on January 18, 1862, just months after the Civil War began. He suffered a stroke at his home in Richmond, Virginia. Notably, the U.S. government, led by Abraham Lincoln, did not recognize him as a former president. In the eyes of the Union, Tyler was no longer a former U.S. president, but a traitor who had sided with the Confederacy. As a result, he became the first U.S. president in history to be denied an official state funeral in Washington, D.C. In contrast to the Union's cold treatment, the Confederate government honored Tyler. He was buried in Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, Virginia, with the Confederate flag draped over his coffin, a symbol of his unwavering allegiance to the South until his death. Historical assessment of John Tyler. For decades after his death, John Tyler was rarely mentioned in U.S. history due to the controversies surrounding his legacy. Unlike other prominent presidents, he was often considered one of the weakest due to his political isolation and constant conflicts with Congress. However, over time, historians began to take a more balanced view of his legacy, establishing the presidential succession principle. When William Henry Harrison died, there was no clear precedent for how a vice president should assume power. Tyler was the first to assert that the vice president would fully become president, setting an important precedent that remains in effect today. Expanding U.S. territory. Although controversial, the annexation of Texas was one of the most significant decisions of the 19th century. It paved the way for westward expansion and altered the balance of power between the northern and southern states. A stubborn but isolated politician, Tyler had strong political beliefs, but his rigidity led to his isolation, making him the first president to be expelled from his own party. This made his administration difficult and prevented him from achieving major legislative successes. A controversial choice in the Civil War. His decision to support the Confederacy made him the only U.S. president to openly oppose the federal government after leaving office. This severely tarnished his reputation, preventing him from being honored like other former presidents. Legacy in American culture. Though not a widely celebrated president, Tyler left a lasting mark on American history. His home, Sherwood Forest Plantation, is preserved and open to visitors today. Additionally, some places and schools bear his name, though not as many as other presidents. Tyler is also remembered for his remarkably long lineage, with some of his grandchildren still alive in the 21st century, an astonishing fact given that he was born in 1790. Conclusion. John Tyler may not have been a beloved or widely praised president, but he was a figure of great historical significance. From shaping the principle of presidential succession to making the pivotal decision to annex Texas, his policies laid the groundwork for major events in 19th century America. However, his choice to side with the Confederacy during the Civil War permanently damaged his reputation in the eyes of the Union government. Nevertheless, it is undeniable that John Tyler was a unique president, one who faced political isolation, yet had a far-reaching impact on American history.